Marcus Aurelius was born into a noble and respected family, but no one predicted at the time that he would one day become the emperor of the Roman Empire. Emperor Hadrian was nearing the end of his life and chose Antoninus as his successor, with the condition of adopting Marcus. In 161 AD, Marcus became emperor and ruled for almost 2 decades until his death in 180 AD. Marcus Aurelius held the most powerful position in the world. The saying that power absolutely corrupts was repeated in history for good reason. Unfortunately, it tends to be true. However, as the famous historian Edward Gibbon wrote, during the reign of Marcus, the last of the 5 good emperors, the Roman Empire was ruled by absolute power under the guidance of wisdom and virtue. Guided by wisdom and virtue. That is what sets Marcus apart from the majority of past and present world leaders. Just imagine the thoughts he had, left in his diary, now known as meditations, the personal thoughts of the most powerful person in the world, instructing himself on how to become more virtuous, more just, more resistant to temptations, and wiser. These thoughts became a milestone in Stoic philosophy, inspiring some of the greatest men and women in history. And for good reason. Let them also be your guide. Here are 12 leadership lessons from Marcus Aurelius, the last great emperor. Traits of a Stoic leader. Epithets for yourself. Straightforward, modest, unpretentious, sensible, collaborative, indifferent. Hold fast to your right to these epithets without worrying whether others apply them to you or not. Set out, therefore, with this handful of epithets as your guide, and if possible, maintain the bearing of an emigrant bound for the islands of the blessed. And if you find yourself in turmoil, as though shipwrecked, where hope seems far away, anchor at some well-considered place where you can restore your peace. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 10.8, in his wonderful book, The Captain Class, Sam Walker, the deputy editor for the Wall Street Journal, examines unknown leaders who led their teams to extraordinary victories. His book praises captains, not stars or the highest paid players or the most famous players, although a captain can consist of all those. According to him, a captain is an athlete who does the right things to help his team and teammates, regardless of whether he receives recognition or not, because that's what is right to do. In the book, Walker highlights the 7 traits possessed by these captains, and as one can imagine, these often selfless but incredibly self-disciplined leaders are very much Stoic-like. Here are those traits. #tenacity and focus in competition. #aggressive play that tests the limits of the rules. #willingness to do thankless jobs in the shadows. #restrained, practical and democratic communication style. #motivating others through passionate non-verbal expressions. #strong convictions and the courage to stand out. #solid emotional control. If Marcus Aurelius were to coach a football team or lead an organization, this is what he would teach his players or employees. So, we will adopt Walker's rules and present them in Marcus' concept of epithets for yourself. Focused, competitive, selfless, clear, inspiring, courageous, self-disciplined. A leader takes charge. One person, doing good for others, expects a favor in return. Another recognizes the debt, but doesn't rush to collect. A third acts without conscious thought, like a vine bearing grapes without demanding more. Like a horse after a race, or a dog after a walk, or a bee after making honey. This person, after a good deed, doesn't boast or seek recognition, but moves on to the next, like a vine producing another bunch of grapes in its rightful season. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 5.6. Have you ever heard someone repeat your ideas as their own? Have you seen a younger sibling or relative copy your behavior, your style, your music? Perhaps you moved to a new neighborhood and suddenly a bunch of hipsters appeared. As young and inexperienced individuals, we may react negatively in such situations, saying, "Stop copying me. I was here first." But as we mature, we start to see things differently. We realize that stepping up and helping others is a service that leaders provide to the world. It becomes our duty in both big and small situations. If we aspire to be leaders, we must understand that thankless service comes with the territory. We do what leaders do, not for credit, thanks, or recognition, but because it's our duty. Poise, not pose. Ambition means tying your well-being to what others say or do. Self-indulgence means tying it to the things that happen to you. Sanity means tying it to your own actions. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 6.51. In the writings of the Stoics, we see their constant effort to ensure that ambition never corrupts their self-awareness. Their pages rarely display ego or self-glorification. Instead, we find meditations on improvement, reminders of their humanity and flaws. Take someone like General William Tecumseh, the true American hero, sadly and wrongly vilified in popular history. What we find in Sherman, a man who may not have explicitly been Stoic, but embodied the Stoicism of his time, is a deep connection to reality. He came from humble beginnings and achieved great things, yet he never felt entitled to the honors he received. In fact, he consistently deferred to others and happily contributed to a winning team, even if it meant less credit or fame for himself. As one of Sherman's biographers eloquently put it, among men who rise to fame and leadership, two types can be distinguished: those born with a belief in themselves, and those in whom it is a slow growth, dependent on actual achievement. To the men of the last type, their own success is a constant surprise, and its fruits more delightful, yet to be cautiously tested, with a haunting sense of doubt, whether it is all a dream. True modesty lies in that doubt, not the insincere self-depreciation, but the modesty of moderation. In the Greek sense, it is poise, not pose. This concept of poise and not pose, ambition without entitlement, self-study without self-obsession, embodies the essence of Stoicism. It serves as a model for us to follow, especially for those who wish to make an impact. Who would you rather be, Napoleon or Sherman, Alexander or Marcus Aurelius? And who do you believe lived a better life? Tranquility is infectious. Perhaps it is not the circumstances that are pursuing or avoiding you, but rather you are seeking them out in a way. In that case, strive to maintain a steady judgment of them, and they too will remain calm. You will not be seen chasing after them or fleeing from them. These are the words of Marcus Aurelius from his book Meditations, specifically from passage 11.11. This wisdom is not solely applicable to ancient times. It is a maxim that Navy SEALs pass from one officer to another, from one man to another. In the midst of chaos, even during the fog of war, their battle-tested advice is simple yet profound. Calm is contagious. This is particularly true when the source of calm is the person in charge. When the enlisted men start losing their composure, when the unit becomes uncertain of their next move, it becomes the leader's responsibility to instill calmness. However, this is not accomplished through force, but rather through setting an example. Regardless of your profession, aspire to be the individual who remains composed and relaxed in any situation. Be the one who encourages others to take a breath and alleviate their worries because you possess the capability to handle it all. Do not allow yourself to be the agitator, the paranoid, the worrier, or the irrational one. Be the calm presence, not a liability. This demeanor will spread like wildfire. It will catch on and influence those around you. Here is another invaluable lesson from Marcus Aurelius, this time from passage 6.21 of his Meditations. Be willing to alter your opinions. He states, "If anyone can prove me wrong or show me where I have made a mistake, I will gladly change. It is the truth that I seek." How often do we embark on a project convinced that we have an accurate understanding of how it will unfold? How frequently do we encounter individuals and immediately assume we know everything about them? And how many times are we proven completely and utterly wrong in these assumptions? That is precisely why we must combat our biases and preconceived notions as they hinder us. We should constantly question ourselves. What have I failed to consider? Why is this situation the way it is? Am I contributing to the problem or the solution? Could I possibly be mistaken? It is essential to diligently honor what we do not know and juxtapose it against our existing knowledge. Remember, if there is one core lesson inherent in this philosophy, it is that we are not as intelligent and wise as we often perceive ourselves to be. True wisdom emerges from questioning and humility, not from certainty, mistrust, and arrogance, as many mistakenly believe. The control of our passions is another fundamental principle urged by Marcus Aurelius. In passage 11:18.5 bits of Meditations, he advises, "Keep this thought close at hand when you feel a fit of rage coming on. It is not manly to be consumed by anger. Rather, gentleness and civility are more humane and therefore more admirable. A real man does not succumb to rage and discontent. Such a person possesses strength, courage, and endurance, unlike the angry and the complainers. The closer a person is to achieving inner peace, the stronger they are." Why do athletes engage in trash talking? Why do they deliberately utter offensive and upsetting remarks to their opponents when the referees are not watching? It is a tactic to provoke a reaction. By distracting and angering their adversaries, they seek to disrupt their focus and throw them off balance. It is crucial to remember this when we find ourselves on the verge of anger. Anger does not convey strength or superiority. It is a frailty, a mistake. Depending on the circumstances, it may even be a trap set by someone else. Boxer Joe Louis earned the moniker Ring Robot from fans and opponents alike because of his complete emotional detachment. His cool and composed demeanor was far more terrifying than any wild, frantic appearance or emotional outburst could ever be. Strength lies in maintaining control over oneself. It entails being the individual who never succumbs to anger, remaining unshakable because they possess mastery over their passions, rather than being controlled by them. All for one, one for all. In the beautiful words of Marcus Aurelius from his book Meditations, "That which isn't good for the hive isn't good for the bee." This simple phrase encapsulates the essence of the Stoic concept of sympatheia, which emphasizes the interconnectedness of the universe and the belief that everything is part of a larger whole. Marcus Aurelius, a visionary philosopher, was among the first to express the idea of cosmopolitanism, declaring himself a citizen of the world rather than just a resident of Rome. The analogy of being a bee in a hive serves as a powerful reminder of this perspective. Marcus even articulates the reverse of this notion in his Meditations, ensuring that he doesn't forget. That which doesn't harm the community can't harm the individual. This teaches us that just because something may be detrimental to one person doesn't mean it applies universally. Similarly, just because something may bring benefit to an individual doesn't guarantee it will have the same positive effect on everyone else. Consider the hedge fund managers who wagered against the economy, profiting from the failure of others. Is this the kind of person we aspire to be? The true Stoic, like a wise leader, comprehends that proper intentions and righteous actions naturally contribute to the greater good. Conversely, actions that benefit society ultimately benefit the individual. The strong accept responsibility. In the words of Marcus Aurelius, if we judge as good and evil only the things in the power of our own choice, then there is no room left for blaming gods or being hostile to others. This sentiment echoes the sign on President Harry Truman's desk that boldly stated, "The buck stops here." As the president, the highest position of power and control, Truman knew that he couldn't blame anyone else for his actions or consequences. He carried the weight of responsibility, and there was no one to pass the blame to. The chain of accountability ended with him in the sacred space of the Oval Office. As aspiring great leaders, we must internalize this same attitude. We may not have control over external events, but we possess the power to govern our attitudes and responses. That alone is more than enough. Every day, we should remind ourselves that the buck stops with us. There is no one else to point fingers at or shift blame onto. We hold the power to shape our destiny. Impossible without your consent. Marcus Aurelius once reflected, "Today I escaped from the crush of circumstances, or better put, I threw them out, for the crush wasn't from outside me, but in my own assumptions." On challenging days, we often find ourselves saying, "My work is overwhelming," or "My employees are really frustrating." However, if only we realized that these assertions are fundamentally impossible. No individual or external factor has the ability to intrinsically frustrate or overwhelm us. These are merely objects outside of us and have no access to our innermost thoughts. The Stoics refer to this as hyperlipsis, the act of taking up perceptions, thoughts, and judgments in our minds. It is our assumptions and the mental constructs we willingly generate that shape our experiences. We cannot hold others responsible for our stress or frustration, just as we cannot blame them for our feelings of jealousy. The cause resides within us, and they serve merely as the targets for these emotions. So, let us embrace the Stoic teachings and carry the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius in our hearts. Let us recognize that we are interconnected with the world, responsible for our actions, and masters of our internal states. In doing so, we can truly embody the ideals of Stoicism and lead lives of fulfillment and integrity. Don't let TGS go to your head. Beware of being made emperor. Steer clear of that imperial tarnish. It can happen to you, so keep yourself pure, modest, good, virtuous, humble, a champion of justice, reverent of the gods, kind-hearted, loving, and unyielding in your appointed tasks. Fight to remain the person that philosophy intended you to be. Honor the divine and take care of each other. Life is short. The harvest of this life is a solid character and deeds for the common good. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 6.30. It is nearly unimaginable to contemplate the life of Marcus Aurelius. He did not ascend to the throne by birthright, nor did he actively seek the position. It was unexpectedly thrust upon him. However, he found himself suddenly the wealthiest man in the world, the leader of the mightiest army on earth, governing the largest empire in history, seen as a deity among mortals. It is no surprise that he wrote notes like this one to himself, remind us not to lose sight of what truly mattered, to resist falling victim to the demands of those who sought things from him. Here we are as well, in whatever roles we find ourselves, at risk of losing our way. When we achieve success, we must ensure it does not change us, and that we maintain our character despite the temptation. Reason should guide us, no matter the good fortune we encounter. No random actions. No random actions, none not based on underlying principles. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 4.2. The opposing team comes out strong, establishes an early lead, and you never had time to recover. You walk into a business meeting, caught off guard, and it goes poorly. A delicate conversation escalates into a shouting match. You've switched majors halfway through college and had to start your coursework over, graduating late. Sound familiar? It is the chaos that results from not having a plan. Not because plans are flawless, but those without, like a line of infantry without a strong leader, are far more likely to become overwhelmed and fall apart. Super Bowl winning coach Bill Walsh prevented this risk by scripting the beginning of his games. "If you want to sleep at night before the game," he said in a lecture on game planning, Have your first 25 plays established in your own mind the night before. You can walk into the stadium and start the game without that stress factor. You can also shrug off a couple of early points or a surprise from your opponent. It's irrelevant. You already have your orders. Don't try to improvise. Have a plan. The Philosophie King. No role is so well suited to philosophy as the one you happen to be in right now. Indeed, how does this pertain to you? There might be fewer kings nowadays, but we all play leadership roles in some capacity, whether leading a family, a company, a team, an audience or friends, or even leading oneself. The study of philosophy nurtures our rational thinking and moral values, enabling effective fulfillment of our responsibilities. We cannot afford to just wing it. Too many people are depending on us to do it correctly. For I believe a good king is from the outset and by necessity a philosopher, Musonius Rufus said, and the philosopher is from the outset a kingly person. The Israeli general Herzl Halevi emphasizes the importance of philosophy in his role as a leader and warrior. People used to tell me that business administration is for the practical life and philosophy is for the spirit, he said. Through the years, I found it is exactly the opposite. I used philosophy much more practically. War and leadership call for a constant series of ethical decisions that require priorities, balance and clarity, and that is where philosophy provides assistance. Plato understood this when envisioning a utopia ruled by a philosopher king. Either philosophers should become kings, he stated in the Republic, or those now called kings should truly and sufficiently undertake philosophy. Marcus Aurelius embodied the essence of a philosopher king. What does this have to do with you? There might be fewer kings these days, but we all hold leadership positions in some form, be it leading families, companies, teams, audiences, friends, or even ourselves. It is through the study of philosophy that we develop our rational thinking and ethical principles, enabling us to fulfill our roles effectively. We cannot simply improvise. Too many people rely on us to do things correctly.